Hello, guys. It's Mr. Holman. It's Wednesday, day 3. Today, we're going to talk about the effects of the Black Death. So this will be the last little mini lesson, and then I'll explain at the end what you're going to do next. So before we begin, I'm going to have you pause the video basically right now and to watch about a 5-minute Edpuzzle on the effects of the Black Death. So the Edpuzzle is called The Effects of the Black Death. And then there is a slide immediately after that asks you to tell me 3 things, 3 ways society changed. You can click and add those on the left-hand side. And it asks you to pick one and to try to explain it in detail. So you can say, for example, the church lost power. Okay, good enough. But that's not explaining it. So you could try to explain how that happened. You're going to get plenty of examples. The slide above before even tells you a few things. So you shouldn't have much trouble. Pick one of those effects at least and try to get an image that helps you see that. The rest of the slideshow, we're going to kind of walk through each one of these and try to explain them a little bit better. So you can pause it here and go watch that and move forward. All right. Now, so there are a few things we're going to talk about. You don't have to click on these readings, but I'm going to tell you about these people called the flagellants. These were a group of religious zealots. Zealot means they go to the extreme. So these were a group of Catholics who believed that if they beat themselves, God would protect them. So one of the effects was the rise of these political zealots. These people would whip themselves until they would bleed. They would suffer so much pain that they believed that would, again, it's relating back to Jesus' suffering. They thought that by doing that God would spare them of the Black Death. They're just a side note. They're not one of the important effects, but they're a rather interesting group. Some of you will find them very interesting. This is a video clip from a movie that actually is at the end of this. The whole video is at the end. And it just shows a scene of the flagellants coming into town and sort of what it might have looked like. Where it really gets important to us are these next ones. So these are the ones we want to focus on. We're going to focus on 4 things: feudalism, the workforce, medicine, and faith in church. There is a link here. You don't have to read it, but you can go read it. I will point out that it's going to be helpful in the sense that it is highlighted too, so you're not reading every single thing that's on the page. Hopefully, once it loads, there it goes. It highlights and kind of gives you some ideas. It's pretty quick to help you understand. By the way, this dude right here is called the Plague Doctor. Never appears during the Black Death in the 1300s. The Plague Doctor doesn't come until the 1600s, although I mentioned that on a slide later too. So let's take a look at how and why do you think these things changed in society. So the first thing we're going to look at is the feudal system. The feudal system basically collapses. So let's just think about this. If half the population dies, and that's nobles, that's knights, that's some kings, although there was only one king, only one nobility that I could name, that king or queen that died that I could name for you. But the system kind of begins to collapse. Now, you've got to remember something, and don't think the Black Death came and one day the feudal system was great and the next day it was gone. That's not how things work. Remember what we've talked about all year. So hopefully you're looking at the little picture of me, but there's that gradual up and then down, right? So the Black Death is the ending. It's curving. Feudalism is gonna die. It's on its way out. So feudalism is beginning at that point of the Black Death. So many people die that what really happens is the workforce drastically changes. And that's going to cause feudalism to just begin to go. So what happened? Well, first thing, so many peasants died and there was so much free land now. There are so many nobles and knights that died. There's just land available. So it changed the whole concept of I have to work on somebody else's land and basically pay a tax. More importantly is the political, or this gain over here you begin to see. The cities that survived offered money for people to come and work. They ran out of people to do paid labor. So all of a sudden the peasants could leave the manor, go to Paris, go to London, go to Frankfurt, go to Madrid, go to Venice, and they could make cash. They no longer had to work the farm and only get paid in food. That's going to fundamentally end feudalism. Feudalism is about the idea of payment is based on land, right? You have to pay 1/10 of your crops. That's going to kind of disappear because now I don't have to work the field. I can go live in the city and I can get a paying job. So feudalism is going to begin to tip. The base is falling apart. Again, it was a higher percentage of, if 90% of the people are peasants and you lose 50% of the people, it's the peasantry that's going to collapse the most. Your nobles and kings were lost at about the same rate, but there just weren't enough of them to really make a dent. So that then changed the thing of me living in a big castle. I have this great castle, but I have no one to grow the food for me. So nobles, for the first time, have to find people to work, and they have to pay them. The system of you just working the land and I'll give you land to work isn't going to work anymore. Sometimes, and in the video you saw it, nobles in Italy especially had to go work their own land, and they didn't know how to do it. So they couldn't produce enough crops for themselves. Their families began to suffer. So that's going to be really important, is this idea that the feudal system begins to collapse and that peasants can go to the city and get paid for their work. And that's going to come up in two of these. So that's kind of the workforce and the feudal system. The other piece is medicine. Again, here is where I noted the plague doctor isn't real. It wouldn't have happened back then, but kids always see pictures of him and they want to talk about the plague doctor. Not hugely important. The way that this is really important is medicine really changes here. This is a big change in the medical world. There was a doctor who was actually the Pope's doctor who got the Black Death and lived through it. So he's one of those 10% that survived. I can't remember his name, but he wrote this massive book about observing people. And it's kind of like the scientific method. He started to kind of wonder and observe what was going on and see what was happening. He didn't think God did this. There's something else causing it. That is a huge shift in thinking. This isn't God. This is something else. That's the shift towards science. That's going to become hugely important. The Middle Ages, right, is up here. Crusades, Magna Carta, right, Black Death. At that same time, now you can't see it, but as this one's coming down, now there's a new way to think. There's science. There's the idea that God doesn't control everything. So somewhere in this period, we're seeing that split where the Middle Ages goes down and this new idea comes up. And one of the big parts of that is the scientific idea. It's called secular. Secular means that not everything's God. Secular means non-religious. So you're turning, I'm not going to say away from God, but they're looking for other causes for things and other reasons why things are happening. For some people, they will turn away from God, and we'll get to that on the next slide. So this is the beginning of a huge new idea, that science can solve problems, that we can look, and in medicine, there are ways to address. They begin to think about germs. They don't understand them yet, but that process is beginning. That's what's hard for you guys to understand, and I think for a lot of people, is like Rome just didn't fall. One day Rome's here, and the next day it's gone. Rome just decayed away. But that when the Visigoths, Ostrogoths invaded Rome, that's where historians say, that's it. Rome's not gone, but it just kept fading away. That's like the turning point. So for us, the Black Death is a big turning point in like thinking about religion versus science. So science is going to become very important as we move forward. P.S. On another note, I mentioned at the beginning that the plague they said that a lot of, that it was caused by poison in the air. The other thing I didn't really mention, which I should, is the way they othered people. And of course, the Jewish people were blamed for the plague, and almost every town and village that there were Jews in. The Jews were blamed. They were blamed for poisoning wells with poisons that would cause the plague. So Jews, by the way, were dying at the same percentage as Christians. Clearly didn't happen. Clearly not the Jews doing it. Yet the Jews were scapegoated and killed and murdered by the Christians throughout Europe. So that's something we've talked about a couple times with the Crusades and other places where the Jews were picked out and basically attacked for being the other. Same thing with Muslims in the Reconquista, right? It was this idea that they were the other. They must be the problem, a scapegoat. Not true, but it happened. The last one's maybe the biggest one, and I've kind of referenced it with this idea of science turning away from religion, but really big issues for the church. We had talked about in Quest 5 that to get to heaven, you had to go through the sacraments. The sacraments were, we said we didn't have to know them all, but there was baptism, right, marriage, and we talked about the last rites. The idea of last rites is when you're on your deathbed, you have to get the last rites to be given entry into heaven. People went to the church, begged the church, please give us the last rites, our family's dying. And guess what many of the church members did? They ran. They wouldn't do it. They were afraid. That's pretty, that can happen with anybody. And so people looked at the church and said, you can't help us. The first thing people did when they saw the plague come was pray to God. Stop this, save us, blah, blah, blah. It didn't work. And so people began to lose faith in that process, that God would answer prayers and come and save all this. That's a huge change. Again, it's not like the church is gone, but you see the Crusades, the church begins to dip. And now the Black Death, that's a big, big decline for them. They got so bad that the Pope said you could just dump people into rivers, like he wouldn't give them the last rites. He told regular people they could give the last rites. Well, that's contradictory of what's happened for the last 900 years. So it seems to be this isn't working. So the beliefs begin to change. People start to wonder, maybe this isn't everything that we should know. It's going to lead to other things very, very quickly. And people started to turn towards science and towards other humans and away from some of the religious. You can kind of see it in this page where the people are walking by and people are raising and begging for help, and the church just can't do anything. And so they saw it as, they basically, I guess I would describe it from my perspective, like they felt let down, like the church couldn't do. Therefore, maybe it's not all it's cracked up to be. At least that idea starts with people, and it's going to take on some more. One of my last ones that I like to talk about that doesn't come up a ton is this. It's called Danse Macabre, and Danse Macabre art starts to develop. I gave you a link to look at Danse Macabre art, and this is really an important thing. And so I'm going to try to summarize this in basically two ideas I want you to grab from Danse Macabre art. But even in this picture, it's one of the more famous ones. This is actually the most famous. You can't see the whole thing, but it's really, really long. Like, it's very long. I believe it's long. But anyway, if you look at it, you can see that this is a noble woman, and she's dancing with death. And this is a priest, it's a bishop actually, probably, and he's dancing with death. And the peasants dancing with death. And the king's dancing with death. And the knights dancing with death. And what they're trying to say to you is we are all equal. In the end, we all die. That is a philosophical shift. And the king is better than me. The Magna Carta said the king must follow the law. Now you have this idea creeping into people that in the end, we're all the same. Again, it's the first time in 1,000 years where people start to think I'm equal to these others. Didn't just happen. It's an idea that grows, right? But this is really some cool stuff when you start to look at it. Again, you see bishops, maybe even the Pope here. I think that's supposed to represent the Pope. So this whole concept of Danse Macabre artwork showing the king, the noble, the knight, that we all die. That's important, right? And it gives us that idea that we are all created in equality. The other thing it says, and this is a little bit harder to think about, but it's going to become important as we move through the last couple of weeks in the class, is the Danse Macabre art also says, live life. Live. Right? It gives us this idea that in the end, we all die. So you might as well live. And if you remember back to when we talked about Rome, people lived life. And at the beginning of the Middle Ages, people were trying to survive life, not live. And the Danse Macabre art comes in and says to them, live life. Like life should be joyous. There should be fun in life. We shouldn't have to wait to get to heaven to enjoy that idea. So this is the beginning of another idea that, right, we're all equal, and at the same time, start living life. So I think that's about as much as we can get here. So that's going to take us to this isn't the knowledge check I put. I'll switch this slide out. I must have got the open up a wrong slideshow. There was 4 or 5 more questions on here. This really isn't a knowledge check. I changed it to say, hey, can you answer these questions? So it gave you a series of questions. I'll switch that out before because that's my error. So again, the way we're going to run this, and you'll look at the last, I will show this slide with you too. This is actually an hour and 30 minutes. It's by the History Channel. If you are interested in any one thing, I don't know why I did this. I did it years ago, but I was kind of crazy. I literally went through minute by minute of the film and kind of told you what's going on. So if you want to learn about what was going on in Lower Mongolia, you can go to 1219 to 1258 and it'll tell you about that. So it goes through the whole movie and tells you the whole hour and 30 minutes. I think it does. Oh, maybe that's not loading, but anyways, at least it does for the first 20 minutes on there. But that's a pretty cool thing. It's online. You can watch it. If you're interested, it's a pretty interesting film. So the way we're going to do this again is we're going to have you complete your blog, right? To do your blog, I'm not sure people are listening to all the slides or the directions, so I'm going to try to explain this one more time. If you did the slideshow, that means you filled in the blank slides and you did the things we talked about and you listened to what I said, and you put it on your blog, that guarantees you a 75. You get a 75 for the week. You did these 3 lessons, right? I did 3 recordings. You listened to them. You did what you were supposed to. You get a 75 guaranteed. I will provide the knowledge check on Friday or Thursday. If you want to take it, you must have done the blog first. I'm giving you, even if you get a 99, I'm giving you a 75 because you have to do the C first. I have to know you did what I asked you to do first. But if you get a 95 on the knowledge check, then you will get a 9.5 for the week. You will get a 95, right? If you get a 85 on the knowledge check, you will get an 8.5. If you get a 25 on the knowledge check, you will get a 7.5 because I guaranteed you that if you did the slideshow, you would get that. The other option I gave you was to not take the knowledge check. You could just build your normal blog. You embed the slideshow that we ask you to do, and then you write historical fiction like you have, which some of you have done excellent work and we want you to continue. Some of you might want to do maybe you pick 5 places the plague went to and you build a Google Earth project. That's great. Maybe you do a thing link or you do a map or you link 2 thing links together. The idea is for you to build something that helps you understand the content. So we're going to have you do the blog. That's a 75. Again, and by the way, you don't have to do the blog. You don't have to write or make a thing. If you get an 85 and you want to be done with a B for the week, then you're done. Don't do your blog other than upload the slideshow. If you get a 79 on it and you're like, gosh, I want an A, well, then you can still do your blog. But if you're going to do the blog, just do the blog and forget the knowledge check. You don't need to do that. Go do your blog and you can get up to a 10 on that. So that's the way that contract grade, it kind of opens the door for you. I know some kids are overwhelmed with trying to write an essay and trying to do this. And so I'm trying to keep it a fair amount of work. And then you have a couple days. If you want to do more, you can. And if you don't, you got the basics of what the topic is. So with that said, that's the end of the lesson for today. Again, upload your blog first with your finished slideshow, which should be done right now. And then tomorrow, the knowledge check will be available if you want to take it, or you can just continue with your blog. Have a great day. Hope you learned something about the Black Death. Please don't forget question and answers. If you're reading something or you're thinking about something or you're concerned, please fill this in. I will respond to those questions, right? If you have a concern about the topic or if this, well, I should have said that at the beginning, but if this is something that bothers you under the current circumstances, let me know. Well, I'll put something out in the email. Sorry, never mind. Okay, have a great day. Goodbye.